Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Nia. I'll be talking about my experience in the Juniper Fellowship. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here. So first, an introduction to who I am. I'm Nia, and I'm a fifth year physics PhD candidate at Northwestern. I live in the Chicago area. I do research that focuses on fundamental physics, specifically non-Newtonian gravitational forces using tabletop experiments. So that means using like optics and lasers. If you want to learn more about that, I put the link here so you can look at it afterwards. And I'm an EPS Juniper Fellow. So before I go into my experience as a Juniper Fellow, I wanted to first talk about some of my previous SciComm experience. So I'll kind of go through this quickly, but again, I left some links in case you want to ask about it at the end or if you want to click on these after the session. But in the beginning of my grad school experience, I did a program called Letters to a Pre-Scientist. It's a program that matches middle schoolers around the country with a STEM professional pen pal. For the past 2 years, I've also been doing a program called Science Club through Northwestern and other Chicago area universities where we go to a Boys and Girls Club location every week throughout the academic year and do science experiments with them. So I've been working with the same group of four sixth graders for the past couple of years. I also did a comedy show in the Chicago area. If you're ever in the area, I highly recommend attending one of these. It was a comedy show started by a Northwestern grad student where you get paired with a comedian as a STEM professional. And the comedian pretends to give your one of your science presentations and they make jokes about it and it's funny. And then afterwards you come out as the scientist and actually like give the real presentation. And that was a unique experience because it was just like a general audience. Highly recommend. And then back in December, I recently published an op-ed in Scientific American. And I also worked with APS on PhysicsQuest. I was the cover of the most recent kit about making waves. Like Claudia mentioned before, I'm one of the real scientists that are being featured. So you can read my cover story afterwards. And also speaking of PhysicsQuest, I got to recently use the kit um, at an outreach event for one of the clubs that I'm in. So that was really fun. I got to talk to kindergartners through fifth graders about diffraction and waves. And yeah, it was really exciting. I really enjoyed that. Okay, so more about my time as a Juniper Fellow. So, like Claudia mentioned earlier, we have been updating old PhysicsQuest kits and picking a scientist to do a cover story on. So, I picked the PhysicsQuest 2014 kit. Um, and the theme was kind of like quantum. So, I decided to pick a professor that I know, Dr. Charles Brown at Yale, and his research focuses on the quantum properties of synthetic crystals. And if you want to learn more about his research in depth, his website definitely gives like a more in-depth explanation than I can give. So I decided to do a cover story on Charles, and I decided that the best way that I could do this was through a podcast style interview. So I interviewed him over Zoom and recorded the audio and then edited that so that it's in the style of a 15-minute podcast. And one of the challenges here of doing an interview like this was having to explain this type of science to a middle school audience, since these kits are aimed at middle schoolers. And specifically, Charles does like synthetic crystals and quantum properties, like I mentioned before. And so I had to make sure that we carefully described what exactly is a crystal in the context of science. What does quantum mean? Because obviously middle schoolers don't learn quantum mechanics. And so I did this by organizing fun music to keep the audience engaged, structuring it so that the explanations of these more complex topics or unfamiliar topics could be more coherent. And I also wanted to focus on representation and inclusion. So obviously there are not a lot of Black physicists. That's one big reason why I chose Charles as the person for this cover story. And I think it's nice to have kind of a representation for Black and brown kids, because you don't see that a lot in the media. And also I thought it was important to kind of make Charles's experience more relatable. And especially because he's a professor, it might be daunting to think like, oh, like for a kid to think like, oh, I can't like become a professor. That's a lot of work. So I decided to start by talking about his middle school experience and kind of bring the audience in that way, so that we could walk them through his life story and exactly what he did to get to where he is now. So yeah, I brought an excerpt of the interview. This section is specifically talking about like what does a physicist do, and we start talking about his research and like I explained before, like what's a crystal. And so this is just a 1-minute excerpt, and let me make sure that my audio is being shared. Oops. I had to allow access. And also share my screen.
Yeah, it might be that if you are on like a presentation, yeah, there it is. You have to click it there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, so are you guys able to hear that?
No.
Okay. I might have to just share the audio and like not the image.
Yeah.
I think it won't let me share like the same at the same time. Oh, wait. Okay, that should work.
Now, let's fully answer the question.
Does that work?
No.
Oh, no. Okay. So I'll just share the audio.
That worked for me.
Oh, it did?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I'll share it like that.
Now, let's fully answer the question. What does a physicist even do? I asked Dr. Brown to give us a breakdown of what his research is about.
I've gotten really interested in the physics of crystals. So what is a crystal? It's an arrangement of atoms that have perfect spacing between each atom.
So, crystals, like diamonds for example, are all made up of a grid of atoms, and every atom has at least one electron. Electrons are charged particles, which is why they produce electricity in a light bulb, for example.
These electrons hop around all the atoms that make up the crystal, and the details of how those electrons hop around determine lots of properties of the crystal. Determines how the crystal conducts electricity, how the crystal conducts heat, what color the crystal is, whether the crystal is transparent or not, whether the crystal is magnetic. There's so many properties actually that's determined by the details of how electrons move in crystals. That is inherently a quantum process.
Okay. Yeah, so we talked about like crystals and like overall this research explanation kind of lasts for like about 5 minutes, just kind of slowly walking through like what is a crystal and then what does it mean to have quantum properties and why is that important. Um, so yeah, we slowly kind of walk the audience through that. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about what's next for me in terms of public engagement. I had a lot of fun editing this kind of podcast style interview with Charles. So I am starting a podcast this summer called Coherence Lab. And I want it to be a science podcast that everyone is able to understand. So I'll be interviewing different scientists and talking about their research in a coherent way. And I don't have like a website or social media running for that yet. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter if you'd like to stay updated on that. But other than that, that's all I have. Thank you so much for listening.